Hello, you're listening to the Jerry Hyde podcast. And why not? You could be forgiven for asking, does the world really need another podcast? The fact is, as long as there's people on this planet, we need to hear them. We need to give them a platform, and we need places where our voices can be heard, perhaps now more so than ever before. As someone who's been dubbed the most dangerous therapist in the world, I've spent over 25 years talking to people, and in all that time, I've never met a boring person. Because when you really get inside them, when you really open up and find out what makes them tick, every single one of them is a unique container for extraordinary experiences, fantastic stories and radical ideas. That's something I can promise you about this show, is that we will always feature incredibly unusual, game-changing, rebellious, convention-shattering, and above all else, exceptional people. And that's because everyone has the capacity to be that if you take the time to get to know them. And then together, maybe, we can make this the most dangerous podcast in the world. As someone whose great-grandfather was an Italian knife thrower and by all accounts invented the 99 ice cream, I can't think of anyone better than Anita Roddick to be the first ever guest on my podcast. She conforms to all of the promises I made in terms of the kind of personality that you can expect on this show, plus a whole shitload more. She's a maverick, she's a rebellious person, she's an all-out, downright troublemaker. She's exceptional in everything she says and does. She comes from an amazingly creative family. Her mother was Anita Roddick, who founded The Body Shop. Sam went a step further and created and founded the first ever, as to my knowledge, ethical sex shop in the world called Coco de Mer, which is where I met her about 20 years ago. And I've never had a dull moment with her. She's just got an incredible eye for the things that really, really matter. Not because they're hip, not because they're this week's thing to protest about. She's just on it. So I feel very, very blessed and very it's a great gift for all of us that she's taken time. And when we did the show, it was just at the end of lockdown. I'd been banged up for fucking months, and so had she, I think. And she's got the most exquisite garden. And even though I knew it was not ideal for sound quality, we sat out there, and hopefully the vibe will transfer to you. But it was a really special day, so I hope you enjoy this. Ladies and gentlemen, Sam Roddick. That'll do.
Cheers.
Oh, which first? Yeah, chin chin.
I got mine.
You necked it already?
Yeah, I'm fucking thirsty. I like to get I know. Taste the other one, it's really refreshing.
Oh, I've drunk no water all day.
I know, that's the
I'm really shit. And then when I drink vodka or anything, that's why I don't drink very much, is whatever I drink, I gulp like it's water. That's very nice.
Yeah.
But I thought it was funny when you messaged earlier, like, oh, I'm finishing Zooming at 4:30, and it's become a new verb, hasn't it?
Zoomed, yeah.
What we do is we Zoom.
Zoomatitis. What's the adjective for when you're zoomed out?
Fucked.
It's like it gets dry behind. It actually aches your eyeballs from behind the socket.
I got really burnt out the first month or so, and then I kind of found my rhythm. But someone sent me a piece, which of course I didn't read. I read the headline, but it was a kind of academic article explaining why Zoom is so exhausting, and it was saying telephone calls aren't, but it does something to your brain, like alpha waves or something, looking at someone on screen.
Or yourself. Sometimes.
And I've been running a group 4 nights a week since March on Zoom. And so I've got like 8-9 guys in these it's like kind of miserable celebrity squares.
Yeah.
Confinement celebrity squares of all these guys, little faces, and me sitting in a bedroom in Paris or a bedroom in England, talking to them. But I found, actually, I got used to it after a while. I suppose you get used to anything, don't you, really?
Well, I think it's quite a democracy in terms of platform, like, because I've been speaking to people out in the middle of the Amazon, you know, indigenous leaders, and... Like,
you lost a friend, didn't you, to COVID?
There's been quite a few, but yeah, a hero, called, his name's Paulino Payakan, and he's, like, incredible guy who changed, like, Brazilian history, an indigenous guy who was born, actually, out of contact. So, like, his tribe in living memory know what it's like to live without any contact with Western civilization.
Wow.
Which is like a pre-colonial, they hold a pre-colonial memory, which is like amazing. But anyway, Payakan was incredible. He's like elastic thinker, like genius.
What were you doing out there originally? Because you're one of the only people who knows being there, not to just get shit-faced on local drugs.
Yeah, like I never went. I went there because my mum and dad, but my mum got invited to help this gathering called the Altamira Gathering, and it was of like, I think it was like 150 nations had gathered together against this hydroelectric dam from the Brazilian government. It was in 1989, and Payakan brought this gathering together, and it stopped this huge hydroelectric dam from being built and inundating thousands of square kilometres. And after that, you know, it was an extraordinary, powerful moment, because it was a moment where Indigenous people kind of stepped onto the political platform and became internationally known for their resistance against development. But they held such a huge articulation. And at that period, it wasn't just an articulation against the damaging the environment. It was an articulation against our culture and how we are children and we don't know how to behave. And actually, we have no idea of the consequences of our actions. And they were here to help us, save us, and teach us. So that was the discourse at the time. And they were like, you know, the forest isn't an object. The forest is a living entity, and it's there to assist the whole world. And it is a spirit, and within that spirit, it holds a purpose that basically contains the cure of the universe. And essentially, they understand that nature, the relationship between nature and man, is actually a collaboration of pleasure. So they actually don't see nature as something to curtail or to control or to fear. It's actually all about how it can bring you back into yourself in a way that is actually about, is there to feed you, is there to house you, is there to keep you safe and soft. And actually it's there to enjoy, and you bathe in it, and you basically bask in its kind of pleasures. And we are there in relationship to enjoy the pleasure of what nature gives. But in return, there is this relationship of tending to and caring and respecting and valuing and worshipping. So within it, it's a total reciprocal relationship. So the concept of like poisoning the rivers, or like cutting down the forest, or even taking like crystals out of the earth, is such a violation to the bones of their mother, the blood of their mother, or, you know, the water of their mother. So it's philosophically it's diametrically opposite to how we perceive nature as a product of our use. We commodify and objectify it. And they're like, you like children,
do they have
your babies.
misogyny in their culture? Because in my latest book, which was originally meant to be about masculinity, and I came around here and we talked about it, and then I ditched that whole thing because it was just really boring. But it became, I think it was very influenced by that starting point, and I was looking a lot of, I suppose, the work that I've been doing with ayahuasca, and looking at the conversations we had around misogyny and going, well, isn't this just another aspect of misogyny, the way we're treating the world? If it's Mother Nature.
Yeah, exactly.
The way we rape and pillage and just take it for granted and, abuse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like we put the father on a pedestal, unattainable and detached murderer, and the mother we abuse and disrespect and not care for and believe that doesn't hold. Yeah, completely. I think, but I think in terms of like...
So do they have a misogynistic culture, or is that...
Well, there's so many different cultures, it's kind of hard to like collaborate. And also anthropological, our questioning comes from misogynistic mind. So we're immediately determining who has a value and who doesn't in when we interact. We're so...
Because we're conditioned misogynistically.
Yeah.
We do what?
So we basically point our perspective, or we, we would, the way we even interpret cultures is through our own conditioning, because we're asking every culture to revert into the system of our own, because we're constantly dominating. So it's not like, I don't even think we ask the right questions. I don't think we even know how to understand what isn't. Like, because we're reverting it straight back into, well, where's the chief? Yeah. You're like, and they're like, there is no chief. And you're, well, what do you mean? Okay, who's in charge? Right, so we reframe the questions always to fit our sense of what we need to hear. And so then finally they're like, oh, fucking hell, they don't listen. Like, he is then. Like, so I think it's like anthropology is massively questionable, and the history of it is massively questionable, and the purpose of it is massively questionable, in the sense of we utilised it to conquer. It's not a science that really holds a real detached, or it's not a pure inquiry. We're not asking the questions we're trying to right now, but I think it's too late.
Yeah, I should have come and talked to you again before I sent my new book to the publishers, because I really picked up on this thing, and I without knowing if it's true, but these statements that I read, I guess from people, probably white men observing indigenous people, but this statement that before the agricultural revolution, culture was much more egalitarian, and once we had ownership, then we started to possess women also, because you had inheritance, and therefore you needed to know that your child was definitely yours. So it became pre that. The suggestion is that people weren't misogynistic in the same way, certainly, because there was no ownership.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's quite interesting, like, to hold that question, and I'm sure a lot of it is really true, but people lived in a much smaller society. Yeah,
I think there was about 1 million people worldwide.
Yeah, and also, like, we've had agriculture for so long. It's like we think the agricultural revolution kind of kick-started agriculture, and it didn't. Like, so we have been holding agriculture way before we've even acknowledged agriculture existed. Right. So it's like even that statement is an untrue statement, but definitely there are matriarchal systems in the world, and there's definitely systems that do not rely on patriarchal governance, and also where women are intrinsic in, like, where women hold their own myths that defy how we define women. Like, even today, like, that hold a different source of power than we would ever care to give women, or genderless, or binary, or trans, or whatever.
What do you make of the countries with women leaders that have done a fuck sight better than in lockdown and with COVID?
Well, I think it's I mean, what can you say?
I mean, Mai explained it to me. I don't know where she heard it from. She said that although Theresa May shatters this concept, she said for a woman to get to that position of power, you need to be so exceptional at your job, whereas for a man to get to that position, you need a penis and a daddy with lots of money.
Yeah, seriously. Also, like, we're not allowed to be able to be such twats. Like, we're just like, just not allowed. We have to prove ourselves, articulation, intelligence. and also hold that position. But like, I don't know, it's a failed system, so why would anybody want to get involved?
Yeah.
It's so failed in every sense. Like, it's so disgusting. Like, you know, we're not even acknowledging the source of corona that comes from a broken food chain. It's like they think it's just, I mean, they know where it comes from, they're not addressing it. So they, you know, like in terms of the market, like the financial market, they're assuming it's going to be, is a one-off and it's going to die out. But yet the information we're being given is that actually it might be like HIV, or, you know, that fundamentally it could be like malaria. It's another statement, and yet nobody's acknowledging it is coming in from the food chain. Well, that food chain is a broken chain based on deregulation and really bad standards. And you're like, shouldn't you just clean it up a bit? Like, maybe get rid of the pesticides, maybe treat the animals really nice, like, you know. And they're like, no, like, you know, like what is that about? Why do they have to, you know, be so reductionary and so violent, and yet so obvious in terms of like treating something so badly and so abusively? Why do we not think that we are absorbing that in us eating that? And why wouldn't nature just go, I'm sending you a message, can you clean up your act? And yet we're belligerent in refusing.
But we're so
it's
cut
based
off.
on our behaviour.
We're so cut off from our food source. We don't. I mean, I grew up where I didn't. By the time I was born, my grandparents had stopped farming animals, but we grew all of our own vegetables. We had maybe 2 pieces of land, so a piece of land twice the size of your garden, and it was enough to be self-sufficient with fruit and veg. And I think that gave me a different relationship. But I've never killed anything to eat. And I call myself, I don't call myself a vegetarian. I mean, it's semantics in a way. I say I'm a meat eater who hasn't got the balls to kill anything. Yeah. Therefore, I eat veg.
Yeah, but you would kill something if you needed to.
Yeah, I would.
But you don't.
But I don't. I'm squeamish. You know?
Yeah, but you're not the problem in the food chain.
I think the problem is, there's a lot of problems, and you know more about it than I do, but I think the problem for many people surely is that you go into a supermarket, there's something wrapped in plastic, you've never hung out with a pig, you don't know what kind of personality a pig has or intelligence, so it's just this thing, this lump of matter that, you know.
The problem is the system is an abusive father figure that basically is making you eat fucking shit. And beating you up if you don't, and essentially is abusing you. We don't have a great role model, right? And it's like, you're like, well, what is it? It looks disgusting, it smells disgusting. And he's like saying, eat your fucking food, else I'm going to fucking whack you. And it's basically, like, that's the metaphor for the fact that nothing is transparent. You could go and you're like, in good faith, right, because of branding or whatever, go in and think you are buying the best product. It's got a label on it, it's grass-fed. It's like, it looks green, it's like best of on it. All of these kind of things that are indicating...
The finest,
right? Good food, or whatever it is. It's all really positive, and it's setting you up saying, this is good for you, but yet it's all hidden, and the utter violence and the conditions that is putrid, essentially, like, it's not visible, it's not actually accessible, that information. So we as consumers are told we have the choice, it's us, but they give us zero information. In fact, they make it so difficult for us to find the good information that we can never feel fully like capable of making decisions for ourselves. And that is the problem. And the problem isn't the society. Society is good. Look at Corona. Everybody wanted to help each other. They're like, please, can I pitch in? I want to save the NHS. Let's buy them chocky bickies. Let's clap for them. What else could we do for them? We want to tell them we care for them. Let's help the old lady. I'll go around and do your groceries. You stay in, Edna. I'll go get your stuff. Don't worry. You know, there was all of this kind of assistance. People were hungry. Let's gather our food. Let's bake for them. Like, society is good. What is really bad is institutes that are superhuman. They're the Olympic gods. Our corporations are the Olympic gods that hold different rules. They hold different social consequences. They have different laws, and they have different data protection. They can withhold information, whereas we can't, right? If I was going to poison my next door neighbor, I would have to basically be totally, utterly beholden to these to social rules, to the rules of society. As an individual, I could be done for manslaughter or actually murder. A corporation can hide behind so many regulations that actually it makes them untouchable, and actually they don't hold the same consequences. And the people at the top don't need to know what actually their corporation are doing. In fact, they don't inquire. They're like, well, it's the supply chain, it's not up to me, it's the person that I buy shit from, and they're the people who are poisoning the farm workers or land grabbing of the indigenous people. And the government goes, well, it's all in good stead, everything's within the country's own legal system, but Nigeria shoots its indigenous people and then mines oil off it. Like, that institutional behaviour is the problem, not society. We have very little power to shift that unless actually our government wakes up and realises that actually who it's really fucking working for. Either we're going to have a revolution, essentially. A revolution is definitely coming, and it's whether or not our government assists that shift, and so it doesn't dismantle in the worst possible way, or it resists that shift.
What do you see that revolution, what form would that take? Because I see a civil war possibly coming in America, but when you say revolution, you mean here?
I think everywhere, because
globally?
People are going to be hungry.
Right, yeah.
People are going to be sick, they're going to be hungry, and they're going to be jobless. So it's like, what the fuck?
Because I was going to ask you, but I think I know the answer, but you might as well spell it out for other people listening. I was going to ask you, how did you move from Coco de Mer and running a sex shop into your concerns about agriculture? But clearly it's the same. There's a trajectory there, or there's a line that...
Somewhere. It's like a bit of fertilisation. A bit like... oral.
But it's all patriarchy and ethics and caring, isn't it, about what people put inside them?
Yeah, exactly. Is it healthy or unhealthy? Is it consensual or non-consensual? Yeah, I think in the sense like...
How you're getting fucked.
Yeah, how you're getting fucked by... Yeah, exactly. Is it good fuck or bad fuck? I think the way I approached Coco de Mer was very political. So it's and also food is pleasure, is the senses.
And as you're talking to me, you're
pleasure.
getting the answer to the question you said earlier about why couldn't you just live a quiet life?
Yeah. I know. But look, I know.
It's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen, hopefully. I think it is fun. I really believe in pleasure, actually. That's what I'm really assigned to. I love pleasure. And nature is pleasure, sex.
You're a pleasure activist.
I'm a pleasurist.
Pleasure terrorist.
I'm a pleasurist, yeah. A radical
pleasurist.
Yeah. So I believe in ethical... Did I say this before? I was an ethical hedonist.
No, but I like it.
I'm a universal ethical hedonist, which means I believe...
But on Wikipedia, it calls you some kind of troublemaker, doesn't it? Which I rather like. It's accurate.
Is it? Okay. I don't know. So my Wikipedia page got completely wiped out, and somebody then rewrote it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it took out all my activism, my real good activism. It was really weird. I don't know why people are weird.
Because you're a troublemaker.
Yeah, because I'm a troublemaker, and then I'm like, I can't be fucked to restore it. But I think pleasure is transformational. But I believe in ethical pleasure, which is least harm possible and maximum pleasure. So least harm would cut out addiction, be taking it to the edge of addiction and then harnessing it back, or that's not my strong point. No, I don't. It's like not tipping it over into pain or oblivion. Is actually really appreciating, it's actually causing least harm possible, and which within that statement is also then acknowledging the delights of the senses, or actually what is the celebration of being human or alive. So it's like fundamentally we're here to dance. Secondarily, we're here to take care of not inflicting pain upon others, if possible. So you just do your best. And within that, it creates a balance. So don't take too much, but to experience what there is to offer. That makes sense. And that's basically what an ethical hedonist is actually a proper ethical hedonism is actually Greek philosophy. And I think that is my mode of operatus.
So I don't even really know much about what you're doing. When you say you've been working today, doing Zoom stuff or visiting farms, doing what?
I've been working with the agroecological farming movement in the UK. So I've been figuring out working with them in strengthening the whole ecosystem of the movement. So I'm doing like 2 types of inquiries, which is how, like Brexit, looking at Brexit and going, where are the opportunities that we can seize within Brexit and what do we have to occupy? So I chose to get involved with the agroecological farming movement, which has a lot around land justice and food justice, access to healthy food for people who can't afford it, plus also looking at alternative models, cooperative models, like that kind of stuff, plus practices that are environmental and restorative to nature. So they're like about nurturing nature back into health via your farming practices. And then, so that is that part. And then I'm also working with the indigenous rights movement in Brazil. So I'm working with frontline indigenous activists in Brazil, doing the same kind of work, looking at ways to decolonialize funding to them and to help put them on amplify their platforms, their intelligence. So it's like engaging with indigenous intelligence and strategies, which are all about like cultural survival, but also resisting Bolsonaro and also protecting their culture and land, but also amplifying them as a real strong political force, because actually, they're still uncontacted tribes in Brazil, and their intelligence is they're outside our thinking. So they hold a different way of doing and a different value system to us, like to the West. And so it's like actually holding that inquiry about like, if we were going to move away from this capitalistic thinking, which is like very much a pyramid scheme, and kind of look at much more of a collaborative, collective kind of like society, we don't hold that in our thinking. We've tried to do it and it's failed, but indigenous people do it really, really well. So it's like they really hold an allyship that is very reciprocal in like, making sure that they have got the resource and the strength to be able to, fight for their land and culture. But also they're doing the job, particularly within the Amazon, for all of us, because it's the lungs of the world. It provides all of like the weather, like the water system that basically moves our weather system is all provided by the rainforest, the Amazon. It's like convection belts kind of moving the weather system around the world. So it's really important. So those are the 2 things that I'm mostly working with. And then I've been working with doctors and nurses in the UK about all of the workers' rights violations that have come under, this corona, which is horrific. It's quite a lot. I've been doing other stuff too.
And a bit of gardening.
And loads of gardening, yeah. So that's what I've been working on.
What was lockdown like for you? And did it make it easier to do what you're doing? Did it make it harder to do what you're doing? Did it change things?
Yes.
So I think it's bringing about huge change. I don't think we can quantify yet, because, like you say, we're nowhere near out of it. But everyone I speak to, which is a lot of people, are really changing. And a lot of that's positive.
Is it?
Yeah.
I mean, I looked at when people got out of lockdown, went on Hampstead Heath, and they took away the bins, and it was like, Daddy, the bins are gone. What shall we do? Just drop it on the fucking floor. So it's like, we do not know how to wipe our asses. We don't even know how to fucking fix anything anymore.
Yeah.
We are such fucking overgrown babies. We're like big, chubby, defenseless babies that doesn't even know how to shit. I mean, if our toilet system got clogged up, what would people do in 2 weeks? If, say, all the sewers, and there was nobody to fix the fucking sewers, 2 weeks, what would we do with our shit? We wouldn't know. It'd be like, there's a hole in my bucket, dear Eliza. We don't know what to do with our shit. And you saw that with Hampstead Heath and the beaches, didn't you? And you're like, at first I was like, you fucking cunts. And then I was like, how can I blame a baby? Like, we've not been taught. And I'll be like, well, of course, I'm like, well, the bin man takes it. Like, and you're like, okay, well, what if the bin man doesn't take it? Well, I'll take it to the Camden dump. Well, what happens if that's closed? Fucking don't know. I literally, personally, and then when I realised I do not know what to do with my shit, like, would I bury it? Like, how long could I bury my fucking shit for? Like, then you're like, fuck, we're in trouble.
Longer than I could, because I've only got plant pots in my place.
Yeah, we'll take the plastic Marks and Sparks bags and bury it in the pot. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Have you thought about it on that level?
Totally. I think we've lost, most of our natural human skills, and I'm such a cynic anyway. But I'm part of the problem, and I really regret not paying more attention when I was growing up to how my grandparents grew food, because I don't know how to do it. I just ate it. I dig the garden for them, but I don't know about crop rotation. I don't know any of that farming stuff that they knew, their parents knew, their grandparents knew, that everyone in my ancestry, everyone knew until me. I'm the first fucking person to forget. And I say I'm cynical because I walk through, when I'm going to Paris, I walk through St. Pancras or I go to Paris, and everything is like, you've got Cafe Nero and you've got Starbucks and these shitholes, and then you've got another one that's not been franchised to death, and it's artisanal coffee. And that appeals.
With an apple.
That appeals to people, I think, on a really base level, because someone's made that. It's handmade by a person.
Yeah.
And I was at my ex-wife's house the other day, and she's just got some planters. I've been, encouraging her, and she's interested in growing food. But we're like, well, how do you do it? We got the fucking boxes. We put some dirt in it, and there's these companies that will sell you, like, for 200 quid, we'll just deliver all the plants you need and bung them in and I was like,
well, actually,
fuck. Well, of course they're selling. They're marketing themselves like this because we don't know.
Yeah.
What's going to grow now? It's July. What can I plant? What should I have planted in March? All that knowledge for most people, certainly in London. I mean, who knows how to go?
And all of that seeds sold out instantly.
Yeah.
Like, I know people who, people I'm working with, they sold out on everything in 2 weeks because of lockdown, because people got scared.
Yeah.
But the great
I didn't get scared. I just got a lot of Valium and nachos.
And then you're like, how long can I do this for? And then you had to stop.
I got some hummus as well.
You got some hummus as well. And you're like, did you get like green from so much? Like, you're like, After week 3, you were like...
But I changed. I mean, fuck, man. I was 3 weeks on my own. So I'm an ex-boarding school person. I'm 56 now. I've lived my whole life going, I don't need anyone. In fact, I'm kind of better off in my own company. I'm an isolate, blah, blah, blah. But I really lived that narrative. And then 3 weeks into lockdown, I hadn't seen a soul apart from on Zoom. And I was definitely, I'm aware enough of my own mental health to realize I was losing it.
Yeah.
And then after 3 weeks of being alone, I thought, well, it's safe enough. I had to go to Paris, and I wanted to go and say goodbye to my mum and my kids. And I went and kind of shouted across the garden at my mum, who's deaf, and we had this kind of mad, kind of socially distanced thing. And then I went to my ex-wife's house, my kid's house, and I walked in, and she said to me, "Oh, wow, you look really skinny." I was like, "Yeah, I've eaten nothing but tortilla chips and hummus for 3 weeks." She was like, "Well, do you want me to make you something? I can make you some pasta. I can make you some rice." And you know that feeling when you're going to projectile vomit?
Yeah.
I got this really powerful feeling down in my belly. I was like, what the fuck's going on? And it grew and it grew and it grew. I could feel this surge coming up, and I just fucking broke down and sobbed. Like literally bent double with that kind of sobbing where your ribs are bruised the next day.
Yeah.
And they were like, what? My daughter was there, and Janan, her mum was there, and they were like, what's wrong? And I was like, it's just that basic thing of someone offering to make me a meal. And I just realised I can't do life on my own for the first time.
Yeah.
And that, I thought, you know, on a personal level, if this whole shitstorm has any value, that's already served a purpose, because I just woke up to the fact that I'm not the isolate that I always thought I was.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think that has to be concurrent for everyone. I was so grateful that Osha was here. My kid came back from New York.
She lives in New York now.
Yeah, and I literally I kind of knew the pandemic was coming before everyone else, because I'm so up on I'm so politically interested.
But did you get bullied for it? Because I run this,
I did.
I run this thing in Nepal, and so I was hyper vigilant.
Yeah.
And I was only maybe 2 weeks ahead of most of my circle, and I clients of mine would come in beginning to get anxious, and I think they had an expectation. You're my therapist. You're supposed to make me feel better, and I was saying to people, this is going to be far worse. And they were like, come on, man, you're making me anxious now. You're supposed to, it's fear-mongering. And I was like, no, you need to wake up. And there was a kind of rejection. People go, this is bullshit. You're falling for the media hype. And I was like, no, this is going to be really bad.
Yeah.
And after a while, I think I even put a post on social media and I went, look, if I'm wrong, laugh at me in 6 months' time, but this is coming.
Well, I kind of figured out that fundamentally the pandemic wasn't going to be as bad as the economic fallout.
Right.
So I was already in disaster politics, and what that would mean for me is much more social unrest. So I'm kind of projecting in 2 years, this is just going to get harder and harder and harder, and we're in the quiet before the storm. So we've gone through the shock, and now we're in the denial, and we're going through those grieving processes that actually society isn't what it's ever going to be, including the excess. The excess is going to be stripped back. But the problem is society isn't fair. So for me, there was a visceral panic of I need to get my fucking kid home, because I need because at least I, being a mum, and you know how your dad, you protect your kids no matter what.
I was around their house last weekend, and we were planting these seeds, and I said to her husband, because they've got quite a lot of land, quite a big garden, not a lot of land, but I said, this is perfect. You can grow a lot of food here. All you need is razor wire and guns now. And it was a joke, but it wasn't, because and I've way before lockdown, having said I couldn't kill anything to eat it, but way before lockdown, I didn't go onto the dark web looking for guns. But when I've been on the dark web, I've gone and clicked on the tab that says guns and just checked out. So how much is a gun? Okay, for £1,000 I could get a gun. Do I need to buy one and hide it at my kid's house these are just, it felt like paranoid fantasies, but I think I was responding. It was Brexit really that was beginning to, just what if there was a complete collapse of society? How could I protect my kids?
Yeah.
It's that primal thing.
Yeah, it's very primal. But you see, the thing is that I don't feel like that. I think for me, my concept of a safe society is a conglomerate society. So this is me holding a community and a strong community. And I think that is what actually creates safety. And also, the value that you're talking about, that whole idea that, we can survive the pandemic, but can we survive a joyless society? And joy is shared. Like, that's what I really felt. I was like, I didn't realise, I thought like me sitting in nature alone and going, oh my God, listen to the birds. And it was so peaceful. It was amazing. You know, many Nepalese hermits must really get off on it, but I'm not sure they're having a laugh.
Well,
right?
as soon as I arrived here, I've been indoors since March. It's now mid-July. I know the sound quality of this recording will be really diminished, but I just wanted to sit in your garden because I can hear birds. I haven't heard birds, you know, I haven't breathed fresh air for months.
I know, it's crazy. You see, and that's joyless.
It's what I always say about art. What I love about art is, you could say, on one level it's not necessary because we need oxygen, we need water, we need nutrition, but a world without it wouldn't be worth living in, and so therefore it is one of the kind of basics.
Well, the indigenous people say their revolution is their culture and celebration. That is how they hold their revolution. And so I think in terms of like, when we actually think about who we are, how do we identify? We identify in how we convene together, how we share joy together, and how we elevate that feeling. Like there is nothing more, there's nothing bigger than the feeling of collective joy in a gig, right? Like even church, like you have like a sermon and then you'll sing and then it's your joy and then you're brought down, but like an hour, whatever it is for a gig, pure music, of music that you love, and the audience and the musicians are colluding together. It's not the audience. A musician isn't a musician without an audience to the degree, because there's an amplification of that joy. And for me, in the lockdown, was really realising that, how actually culture is, like you said, a compass. It's the rudder. It's the thing that gives us blind hope. It is the thing that basically connects us, I think, whether people believe it or not, to our sense of spirituality, even in its most hedonistic moment, right? Like, and that's why I believe in pleasure being transformational and not pain. I believe pain is it has ability to shift your behaviour or compound your behaviour, but pleasure is actually like a hidden, the hidden part that lets your soul rest and ease itself, and then trust life and reconnect and connect with others and all of that kind of stuff that I just think is like amazing. So I've kind of like, shit, I really want to go somewhere where I can have joy. Like my friends in the country, they haven't had a whole different fucking experience, right? I'm kind of looking forward to everybody fucking off to the country and all the shopping malls being deserted, and we turn them into like indoor botanical gardens, or we
mushroom farms,
but beautiful mushroom farms, like, or we say, okay, those office buildings.
But do you know the thing? I wish I knew the name. Do you know the thing about shopping malls and shops like Harrods? Apparently, I read somewhere that it was, I guess an architect or whoever designs shopping malls in the 50s or 60s, first came up with the design where there are no windows.
Oh, wow.
Because if you put people in a windowless environment, they immediately feel distressed, and so they buy more shit.
Oh, really?
Isn't that the most cynical fucking thing you ever heard?
Oh, wow,
so you go to Harrods,
yeah.
which that place always freaks me out. I go into a kind of death coma within kind of 2 minutes of dragging my ass around there. They didn't used to let me in because I wore jeans when I was younger, but they'll let me in now if I wanted to go there. But because there are windows, you look at the outside of the building, there are windows, but they're all blocked off.
Oh, interesting.
Because it distresses us. And so we self-soothe by buying shit we don't need.
Yeah,
it's the same with Brent Cross. It's the same with Westfield. None of these places have... There's no reason, practical reason, why they don't have lots of sunlight, you know, other than to fuck our heads up.
Yeah. But I think that's what was quite interesting is about lockdown, is in order to make lockdown, say if we're having to live with this like a malaria, we'll need outdoor spaces and sanctuaries a lot more, Like,
So when you say like malaria, you mean this is just never going to go away?
this is what they're saying. I mean, I don't know what the truth is. I'm not a scientist. They don't know what the truth is.
I got a dark feeling that the world just changed forever.
Yeah, for
Do
sure.
you know what I mean? That it
Well,
isn't going to be
economically
over
it
by...
has.
Yeah.
We're going into a major recession like we've never had for 20 years, right? Like the debt.
I'm hearing like the worst in 300 years.
Right, the worst in 300 years. I mean, I'm not even sure we had like a global economy 300 years ago.
I don't know. Don't ask
Yeah.
me. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. We probably did. Like,
But what I do is I don't read the news. I've started to look at the news more since lockdown.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by American politics just because it's a game show, and I watch it, like I will, the whole Black Lives Matter thing. I thought I have a moral, as the problem more than the solution. As a white middle class man, privately in a public school educated man, I thought I wasn't racist because I had sex with black women,
hilarious.
and I've never looked at this at all. And so I thought, all right, I have a moral obligation to look at police brutality videos on Twitter, and I started watching them. Go, oh, this is bad. Then I realised I was starting to like it.
Really?
Well, because like you get hooked into watching horror films.
Like snuff movies.
I'm not. Yeah, I don't know. I can't comment on
Look
that.
at them. You might get into them.
But there was something I was beginning to not like. It is the wrong thing. That's too simplistic. I was starting to feed off them. I was feeding off my own rage, my own sense of outrage.
Yeah.
I was
Getting
getting.
addicted
I was
to
getting a kind of high from being outraged.
Yeah.
And I get the same thing with American politics. And I think a lot of people really enjoy having someone to hate. Did you fucking see what Donald Trump did today? And he knows this, and he's playing us all with this shit.
Yeah.
Which is really scary.
Yeah.
And you get kind of hooked on it.
Sucked in, and then getting sucked into the conspiracy theories too.
Yeah.
Some of my friends are sending me conspiracy theories. And I'm just like, I just don't want to look at it. I just don't want to know.
I normally really like a good conspiracy theory, but as soon as COVID hit, I lost all interest. It's like, fuck off. It's not, if you want to burn down Liverpudlian 5G masts, I mean, burn them down anyway. That's cool by me, but it's not what's causing COVID.
No.
Really.
No. Pig farming might.
Yeah. Yeah, bat farming.
Yeah, I do think it's been very painful. It's just been it's been amazing hooking up with my family, spending time in the garden, having meetings with Amazon leaders in the middle of nowhere, conspiring together on like how to, working together diligently. That's like a democracy that I've never seen before. Like I could get like my banker in a conversation with an Amazonian leader tomorrow, right? I could say, dude, just check out what's going on. I could invite anybody, and they're doing webinars like in a way which is permitting and being a platform to having pure access to on the ground information in time, with political discourse that is inspiring. So that's amazing. The brutality is we've only got a finite amount of resource, and the government is unimaginative in what it can do to help society. And it's putting economics over society in a way which is painful.
I've got a solution to this.
Yeah.
Right, you say, hands up who wants to be Prime Minister or President.
And nobody will.
Anyone who puts their hand up, you disqualify them from ever running.
I know, because they're arseholes.
Because the minute you fucking want the job, you're a psychopath, right?
Seriously.
And this is something, I'm aware that we're recording this, and I feel slightly hesitant admitting, but in the last year or so, I've started to have less than hateful, I won't go as far as saying less than hateful thoughts about Thatcher.
Oh, really? I know. Reagan seems like a good guy. Like, what the fuck?
But I was 18, when I left school, it was 1982. It was like right when she was, and it was, it was clearly a shit time even then. Normally you look back and go, well, that was a shit time. I remember sitting in my squat in 1984 with my friends going, this is shit. This is just a shit era to be 20. You know,
Yeah.
why weren't we born 20 years earlier or whatever? But more recently I've started to go, well, she was a vile, cruel person who probably set the course for where we're at now. I mean, you know, probably undoubtedly did that. But nevertheless, I look at her, I look at the prime ministers and the presidents of that era, right up to Blair, and I fucking... The first time I ever voted was when Blair got in, and I celebrated it. It felt like such an amazing thing, and he turned out to be Satan. But I look at people like Thatcher and even John Major, you know, the greyest man who ever lived, and I think, even though you were twisted and cruel, and I don't believe in anything...
Another apple.
I believe that your intention was to govern. I believe that you had some desire to do your job, and the people nowadays, they just want a free bird box. I don't believe that their intention is to govern. And I was talking to my supervisor recently, and I was getting heated about Trump, which you know, takes me nothing. And I worked out a long time ago that a lot of my feelings towards Trump is because he's almost a carbon copy of my father. So there's a lot of personal rage that gets triggered in his homophobia, his misogyny, his racism, you know, all that shit is just my dad. But we were talking about why I get so enraged with Trump or Johnson. And I was like, I don't understand. Why would you get out of bed in the morning unless your intention is to do the best job you possibly can? For me, that's what motivates me to get out of bed. And these people get out of bed like some kind of cowboy plumber who thinks, I can charge that old lady £2,000 to fix the little U-bend in her toilet, you know, a £5 piece of plastic. I can charge her $2,000. That's how they're operating. To me, self-serving scammers.
Yeah, I mean, they are doing the best job for their own people.
Yeah,
And
and they
that
could
is
change the
what's-
world.
yeah.
They've attained a position where they could make huge positive change, but because they wanted the fucking job in the first place,
Yeah.
they're not up to it.
No. And 100%.
Because you know, I'd vote for you, but I know that you're not insane enough to ever want the job.
No, I'd never want the job. And no way. Oh my God, that would be a nightmare. Like that would be like soul death, wouldn't it? Like, can you imagine?
Yeah, there's a malevolent part of me that thinks I know both Johnson and Trump played a long game to get to the position they're in now. And I'm like, well, you're welcome to it, motherfuckers. You know, you got COVID, you got all this shit going down. What an awful time to suddenly, for your dreams to come true.
Yeah. But they probably think they're doing a good job. You know, when you look at it from like a financial perspective, not one of them would have taken a loss. Like, America's with, like, you know, Japan has upheld its footsie whatevers. Europe has bounced back with its footsies whatevers.
Trump's just on Instagram selling beans. Have you seen those photos?
I know. It's just like I think the thing is that they don't.
It's a game show.
They don't touch the people who suffer, and I think they don't even know what suffering is. They don't even care. They're not interested.
No, but I haven't watched a single talk that Johnson has done since this, ever. The only one I watched was the day he got out of hospital. And I went to school with his sister. You know, I've grown up around those people. I haven't chosen to associate with them since I got out of prison. But I know them. And I watched him with kind of horrified fascination, because if I'd just been through that experience and I'd just had my life saved, I would not be able... I mean, I can't talk to you now about being offered a bowl of pasta without being on the verge of tears. I would be in bits. You know, if I was talking about the nurses who stood by my bed and kept me alive. Not that I even necessarily believe that's what went down. I'm sure he wasn't as ill as he made out. But I couldn't have held it together. And I watched him and I thought, I fucking see you, man. Because it's like you could open up this door in his chest and there would be these cogs shutting down the feelings, shutting down the emotions.
Yeah,
The Etonian mechanism, the British public school system mechanism to squash all feelings, and he just sat there and delivered it without a hint of emotion. And when you put people like that in charge, they're sociopathic, and they've been trained to be sociopathic, and they don't give a fuck because they can't give a fuck because they can't even feel for themselves.
Yeah, but also the whole mechanism around them will be telling them they can't do that, and it's very nice, but we've got other things to think about. And so, like, there's all of these, there's all of these mechanisms, even if he wanted to, who he's put around him makes it really preventative for him to do anything. Like, the thing is about Johnson, and that's why he's so much more dangerous than Trump, is his values and his principles, he'll be always up for selling them for his own success. So on one hand, you could see that he could be quite a principled person in the way that he would deal with it. On the other hand, he's willing to sell cognizantly and knowingly those principles. And so I think in that way, I'm always like curious about if he will ever kind of rise to the opportunities that he knows that he could, like, because he has people around him that are actually quite good people, and then he's got other people around him that are just poison. And it's like he's got the angels and the devils, and you're like, which way are you going to look? Like, so I look at him and I just am kind of fascinated by that, but I just don't think he's got courage. I don't think I don't think his identity is based on values. I think his identity is based on winning, and winning isn't good. Like, winning is not the operative goal if you're in leadership. Like, to win, there is no winning, because we're governing like a society here, or like we're having to. So like for me, it's like I don't think he'll ever make the right choice. And I actually think he has to shut that down, because he's actually going against his own value system.
But to have courage, you have to be able to experience fear, and I'm not sure. I mean, I again, back to conspiracy theories, I've started to believe this bonkers David Icke thing that these people governing us and the House of Windsor and whatever are alien reptile shapeshifters. Not because I actually believe that literally, but I think that they are operating from their fucking lizard brain.
Yeah.
They are reptilian in their operating system, and I think that's why people have created this conspiracy theory, because they do behave like sharks or snakes. They're cold and they're not capable of feeling fear like you and I are. They probably are riddled with all sorts of hideous anxieties that they're numbed down to, but that system is, that public school system is just a big machine to shit out sociopathic people who can run the empire.
I know.
Why did you get thrown out?
I got because I was academically a retard. Or I was academically massive. I was dyslexic. But I didn't go to a proper school. I went to like drug, sex and rock and roll school. It's a liberal school called...
Which one was it?
Fensham Heights.
I don't know.
So it's like Sisters with B-Dales and King Alfred's. It's like...
Yeah, because I went to Bryanston, which is sex, drugs, rock and roll, really.
Yeah, but I think we
I went back there recently. I can't remember why.
Was academic, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it said its ethos was to bring out the best in people, by which there was a kind of brackets. We bring out the best in people as long as they go to Oxford or Cambridge. And if you're arty or you smoke weed, we don't really like that. And it brought out the best in me, which was total rebellion and chaos. And I took Nor back there for some reason. I can't remember. I had to go back there. I never go back there, and whenever I drive up towards it, I just get the chills. But I went there. It's because my old, the guy who kind of saved me, he was my tutor, is retiring, and I went back to see him, and I left there 40 years ago, I think, and I would have been expelled because I set fire to the place and got caught smoking dope and all that, but he just bailed me out because I had dyslexia. I wasn't diagnosed as dyslexic, I was diagnosed as retarded.
Oh, wow.
And I was seeing a psychiatrist. So every time I burnt the place down or did something mad, police ballistic experts were called in. They were like, yeah, but, he's got issues. And I went back to see him, and he was saying to my daughter that they've just installed new lockers so the kids can lock their valuables in there, and he had to go and inspect them, and he'd said I took one look at them and I went, well, that's not Hyde proof.
Oh my God.
40 years later,
Yeah.
that's how I'm remembered. It's not some
That's
scholarship
hilarious.
or something. It's whether it's the lock is Hyde proof.
That's hilarious. Well, yeah, I was quite similar in the sense I went back when I was 16. Got kicked out when I was 15.
How old were you when you went initially?
I was 13. 11. And I was
Right.
11.
Yes, I mean, that's very young to send a kid away.
Yeah, I was really young. My parents were just like super busy. Well, they weren't going to send me. I begged them. Like my sister was going at 13. I was like, I am not being left behind. There's no way am I going to be. They were getting busier and busier in Littlehampton, and my grandma's was just like hell. So like I was really grateful that I went because I found my people, and my people were like really artistic, hilarious. They were. I mean, it was an international school. Like the teachers were uninvasive, and it really taught us how to think. But like it was negligent. It was majorly academically negligent at the time. Like if it was like fight for yourself kind of thing. So, but it was hilarious, and it was just like we could take time off to go to a protest. It was politically engaging. So. And it was artistic, so it really fostered my creativity. So it was everything I needed it to be. So it was the best of where I could have gone. But then I just didn't. It was at that point it changed its plan and decided it needed a few more academic grades, and it was like, you're out.
Wow.
That's
well. They didn't. I mean, when I was, how old are you now?
49.
Yeah, I'm 56 now, and they didn't diagnose those things then. You were just
I got
stupid.
diagnosed when I was 14, and then a year later I was out.
I got diagnosed when I was 30.
Yeah.
In those days I was just given Ritalin, and I remember when I was given Ritalin, it wasn't like they give kids Ritalin now. I just used to sell it because it's just, they call it kiddie crack. But I remember the shrink who gave it to me went, because I'd done some IQ tests and I scored very highly, and I remember my dad reading this, the results going, just looking completely baffled. It was like, and he just looked at it and he went, well, if you're not stupid, you must be lazy. So they sent me to a psychiatrist, and he was this tweedy old fucker in Richmond. I remember him saying to me, we're going to give you some pills. We normally give them to fat ladies, but we're going to give you some pills, see if we can pep you up a little bit, because of course they were Ritalin with diet pills originally.
Right.
So they gave them to fat women to stop eating. They all got fucking cocaine habits. And they gave that shit to me, and I took it for a few years, and then I realised it was just rubbish, and I started selling it to my friends.
Oh, brilliant. Start of your career.
Yes.
You're like, I want to be him. The official drug dealer.
There's something really satisfying to me about getting to this age, and actually all those things feeding in to what I do. It's like I never thought when those early days of running around London on acid being idiots would actually become part of my CV or my qualification.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's why I kind of was naturally quite good at working with ayahuasca and things like that. It's easy for me to understand, even if I'm constructing a story that isn't true, why you're who you are. But what made your parents who they were? I can say, well, Sam's, Anita Roddick's daughter. She grew up in that body shop thing. But what made Anita Roddick go?
What she was?
Yeah.
I think my mum was super, super smart and super, super curious. But she was brought up in a very abusive household. So she was poor Italian. Well, she wasn't poor Italian. She was poor Italian, working class. So my grandma had a greasy spoon calf. But before that, she was like, you know, my grandfather, who wasn't my grandfather, but my mum didn't know at that point, because my grandma had an affair, was a gambler, used to race greyhounds that were vicious and kept in the garden. They kind of had a whole house full of like lodgers and Italians.
Where was this?
Littlehampton.
Right.
And, you know, he was a drunk. And so I think my mum was genetically his cousin's kid, and his cousin was a completely different kind of genetic pool. So my family, my real grandfather, and I think it comes down to genetics. My real grandfather they were circus people, right? So my great-grandfather was a circus person. They were basically travellers and street musicians, accordion players, like street, literally.
From Italy.
What?
From Italy.
From Italy,
right.
And played for the Pope, but also Barnum. They were knife throwers, horseback riders, but they were like spoke an ancient dialect of Italian. And so they hid in the mountains because they were basically bandits. So they were anarchic in their thinking and socialist in their thinking. So my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, they made shitloads of money because everywhere they travelled with Barnum, they set ice cream stalls up. And they ended up putting ice cream stalls all over the UK. And they would travel from the UK to Italy to America. And they were like literally like gypsies, essentially. But Italian gypsies, so Romani. So they're really independent thinking. And then my great-grandma, basically gave all of the land. They acquired the mountain that they hid in and all of that kind of land. And my grandfather was a socialist. And my grandfather was my mum's favourite uncle who lived with my grandma. So he's one of the lodgers. But they had an affair for like 14 years. They finally married the year before he died, right? And so, but my mum was brought up with the injustice of the wife beater, and my grandmother used to drag my mum as a baby and a kid into her bed to protect her from that wife beater. And then the tenderness of Henry, right? Because a lot of times he wouldn't come home, this alcoholic, Donny, his name was. And so the story is that Henry was a fiddler, and my grandmother used to play the guitar, and they ended up like sharing music together in the household, and he was like he was a philosopher, and he was a socialist, and his mum gave away all of the land to the tenants, and there was like, he hated the Vatican, and so she was very, because he was her favourite uncle, even though it was her father, she was very politicised about injustice and the poor, and, you know, they were poor, but they worked, they knuckled and boned it, and so they were always clean, and, you know, my grandma made all the clothes, and they grew food in the backyard, and, you know, real immigrant stuff. So my mum had this strong sense of injustice and hatred for the way that Donny treated my grandma, and despised him, even though she thought he was the father.
Right. And
then when she was 21, you know, Henry had died when she was 12, 13. My mum asked, the story goes, my grandmother was in the kitchen and my mum was in the living room. She goes, isn't it sad that you and Henry didn't have kids? And she said, we did. And my mum was like, where's my sister, where's my brother? And my grandmother said, it was you.
Wow.
And suddenly my mum's values aligned. And I think at that point, she basically knew who she was, but a part of that gave her like almost political courage, because he was a proper socialist, my grandfather. So like at that point, she knew all of her sense of injustice was entitled, because she had genetically distanced herself from this fucking arsehole. And, you know, so she was very, you know, women's rights, anti-violence, against domestic violence. Like, the first thing that she aligned herself with was the Holocaust. And she, you know, she really basically became obsessed with Anne Frank as a young teenager, you know, and so she basically found, she aligned with that part of him, I think. So I think it was quite... But I also think it's quite genetic.
But whenever a new client comes in, I mean, I've been doing it 25 years, so I've got my kind of patter down for first sessions. And over the last few years, I've started to ask people, tell me about your great-great-great-grandparents.
Yeah.
Because everyone who walks in here is bringing, well, hundreds of years, but at least a couple of 100 years worth of shit with them.
Yeah.
And tell me about your mother's pregnancy, because this thing that we're formed by the age by the time we're 7 years, I think is not accurate. We're formed by the time we're 7 years and 9 months, because what goes on for our mums and what they're experiencing when they're pregnant with us is so formative as well. But those kind of stories I hear time and time again, where you suddenly get the truth, and you've kind of, it's like a jigsaw piece. You clunk into place, and you kind of have a sense of who you are.
Yeah, exactly.
And the opposite's true. I mean, I was raised half Irish, and I knew I wasn't. I just knew I wasn't. But that's what I was told. My dad speaks with, as he got older, he kind of got a stronger faux Irish accent. I just never felt right. And he would tell me stories about his grandfather and how his grandfather was a terrible alcoholic, and he'd be brought home. He'd go out on a Friday with his wages and drink the week's worth of wages and be brought home on a horse and cart, and the family starved because there was no money, because he drank it all. And how his father, I think the story was his father was from Cork but was a Protestant, and his mother was from Derry but was a Catholic, so they were both brought up in the kind of wrong sides of Ireland for their religion, and they were quite complex stories. And then a few years ago, when you could start to do family trees online easily, I did one, and I went back 700 years, and I think I'm the only person I've ever met in England who doesn't have some Irish ancestry. It just doesn't happen. Everyone's got someone. I went back 700 years.
Yeah.
Not a fucking look. And I still had a little bit of contact with my dad at that point. So I emailed him, and I was like, I don't know, did I misunderstand something here? I can't find any Irish people. He was like, no, I've got my parents' birth certificates. She was born in Derry, he was born in Cork, blah, 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 blah. Like, okay. And then I managed to track down his sister. And my dad falls out with everyone, so he'd fallen out with her when I was like 11 or 12, and so I hadn't seen her or my cousins since I was a kid. And I did some Googling around, and it was weird, I found my cousin who's the same age as me, and I fucking recognized him, even though he was like 54. It's like, I know you're my cousin,
Yeah.
So I messaged him, he put me in touch with my aunt, I went to visit my aunt, or maybe I emailed her, but I said, look, weird question. Sorry to show up after 40 years. We haven't been in touch. Weird question. Are we Irish? And she was like, what are you talking about?
Wow, my dad just made out.
I've been raised that my dad's Irish. And she went, it's absolute nonsense. We went on holiday once for a week when we were kids, and he really liked it there. And I think he just kind of attached to this little, moment of happiness in his childhood and constructed a persona around himself based on that.
Feeling he felt at home.
But the minute I was told I'm not Irish, I felt at home.
That's interesting.
Okay, I know, I kind of feel more aligned with who I am now.
What were you, like 700 years of English?
I'm just English. I said to my dad, if we're anything, we're fucking French. And I went back to the Magna Carta, and there was some French dude who did something and was given some land in Telford, around Wolverhampton, which is where his side of the family are from and have always been from.
Leave
they never left.
For 700 years.
And I was in a taxi with my girlfriend Mai, who's French Vietnamese, and some African guy, Algerian guy, on the way to the airport, and I was taking the piss out of them, going, I'm more French than either of you two.
From the Magna Carta.
You fucking immigrants. I'm the French one here.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's so funny. I'm everything. Spanish, Italian, Jewish.
Knife thrower.
North African.
Definitely a knife thrower.
Yeah, well, you can see actually, because they were travellers, because they came from North Africa, Middle East.
Are you musical?
I think I've got rhythm. I've only just discovered it, because I think music, you have to relax. If you're not relaxed, you're not a conduit. But now I'm actually don't give a flying fuck. I'm like, fucking hell, I do have rhythm. So that's quite interesting. That's a new discovery.
That's another whole podcast. So I was being abused by my best friend's mum when I was 17, and I was living in Notting Hill as her houseboy and sex toy. And I remember going up to the record and tape exchange in Notting Hill, and I bought this record. It was called Brian Jones Introduces the Pipes of Pan, a Jujuka, I think. So Brian Jones from the Rolling Stones. And it was really expensive, like a tenner. I mean, I was maybe getting 10 quid or 15 quid a week for doing the housekeeping and providing sex for this old woman. But I blew my money on this record. I just knew I had to have it. And it was Brian Jones went up to Tangier, up into the Rift Mountains in '67, I think, with a reel-to-reel, and he recorded these. They do a week-long ritual. I was there last year for it by complete coincidence, where it's for Eid. They slaughter millions of sheep and they drum for about a week and they smoke hash and they go into these kind of trances, and it's pre-Islamic. The Jujuka is a little village where they still practice this pan ritual.
Oh, wow, interesting.
So I bought this record, and it's very lo-fi, but I listened to it for years, and as a pretty amateur musician, I just could not get my head around the time signatures of these rhythms at all.
Wow, they were just like up,
all
up,
over the
up,
place
up,
compared
up.
with rock and roll.
Yeah.
And I listened to it ever since, and then about 10, 15 years ago, I was running a retreat and I decided to use this piece of music, and I rigged up a sound system in an orchard and built a fire and had these people kind of walk out in the night, and I hit them with this thing, and I listened to it in nature. First time ever. I'd only ever listened to it indoors, and there was something about the fire and the vibe and listening to this, and I suddenly got the rhythm.
Wow,
So
how
I
cool is
totally,
that?
I've heard this before, and it was when the first time I heard Norse Heartbeat. When because we'd lost 4 kids, and we went in and we thought she was dead, and the guy put the fucking the microphone on Janan's belly, and there was this beat like bang, 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 bang.
Wow.
And we knew she was alive.
Wow.
And we didn't know if she was going to make it. And I realized, fuck, that's the first rhythm.
Wow.
Is the fetal heartbeat.
Wow.
We're all born with rhythm.
Yeah.
That's where we come from.
Yeah.
You must have heard it. It's really fast.
Yeah, it's very fast. So up.
Yeah.
It's like up, 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 up.
It's
like,
rave. It's rave music.
Yeah. It's like
I want
pushing
to go into
it's
this.
not like coming into the chest.
the
It's like pushing against the ribs, isn't it?
No, you want to drop a pill and go into see the consultant.
Yeah. Nature is amazing. I think in that sense, it gives you everything you need if you actually are willing to listen to it.
Yeah.
And I think that is it's like that's what bringing home is, like brought you home to that moment. And that's nature. We are nature.
But there's, again, I've doing a lot of writing over the last year or so, and the Dunbar number, that thing Dunbar was an anthropologist, but he established, if that's the right word, I don't think it's a theory. I think he just observed tribal cultures and came up with this thing called the Dunbar number, which is human beings live in tribes of up to 150, and then they tend to subdivide.
Oh yeah, because that's a perfect number.
Yeah.
Of like they've actually.
Well, it's to do with your cortex. Again, I'm shit with biology, but our brain only has the capacity to manage 150 relationships.
Because they say crime occurs with more, like crime starts occurring beyond that number.
Yeah.
That's what is,
And I think if you're in a culture or a community of 150 people, I was writing about the kind of obsession with fame, and I thought, well, if you're in a tribe of 150 people, we're all famous, right?
Yeah.
So surely it's coming from that instinct of just wanting to be seen and recognized within your community.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's why it doesn't work when it's a global fame thing. It's miserable. But I think when you're voting for someone and you're in a tribe of 150 people, you know the fucker, right? You know whether he's trustworthy, whether he's shagging someone, whether he's ripping everyone off. It's a reliable system.
And whether you're willing to go with it.
Yeah.
And how you're going to benefit from it.
So once you go beyond that, and when you think 10,000 years ago, if there were only 1 million people, of course the planet was sustainable and people are living in little nomadic groups,
Yeah.
it's a system that works. And I feel very pessimistic because we've just gone so beyond our nature.
Maybe. I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if I believe in theory. Do you know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, I do think we have constructed really rigid belief systems that we've bought in as a truth, and we're not really willing to give them up, and those truths aren't working anymore, and we've basically got to fucking chuck them out. And it's more like...
Well, that was my first tattoo, right? Nothing is true, everything is permitted.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm totally with you. I think you have to question everything, and you have to be willing to deconstruct everything. It's why I really distrust anyone who calls themselves an expert. And Osho said, what was his quote? He said, where there is certainty, there's no learning.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the minute someone says, I'm the world expert, I'm the authority in this, well, no, you're not, mate, because you stop learning. You can have expertise, which I recognize in you, and a lot of people I respect. You have a huge expertise, but you've never got to the point where you've gone, I know all of there is to know about this.
Yeah, exactly. And the curiosity. Like, so Davi Yamamami, I think it was Davi Yamamami or Alton Krennic, one of the indigenous leaders, they're like, we don't want you to get rid of cities, we just want you to put a forest right in the middle of it. And it's just like, you know, what are we willing... It's not what we're willing to give up. It is how are we really willing to be innovative? And does our innovation have to constantly hold an economic return in the system that we have? Because if we're not actually, like, willing to give up, not give up, because I think it's not about giving up, it's about actually doing something different. So instead of, like, going, what do we have to sacrifice, which is actually quite a really disastrous perspective. Like, why would anybody want to fucking give up anything, right? What about if we then say, well, what do we need to put more in to our lives and to each other? And I think that, like, how do we want to play with the reality we're living in that can align more to a real value system, one that is about tendering and caring for, and I think, and actually what really is going to create safety for each other, right? And we have forgotten, and I think this is what, going back for me and for you into quarantine, is we are dependent on each other. There is not like, even all of the countless nameless, faceless people who are actually trapped in a form of slavery, providing for us, we're dependent on them. Right? So if we changed our system to something that's much more caring and tending to each other's needs, we might not need as much shit, right? In fact, we might have way more return from it. Like more bees, why not? They're fucking awesome. More wildflowers, why not? It's fucking awesome. More delicious food that's healthy, why not? It's fucking awesome. Like, you can make all kinds of different ferments from it, or like more natural drugs, why not? It's fucking awesome. Like, more roaming, why not? It's fucking awesome. Like, it's not that we should stop traveling, we should change the way we travel and allow the roaming to exist. Let's roam, let's exchange, let's do all of these things. But instead of, like, really rigidly holding ourselves account in these kind of really hierarchical but penial positions, like, I met Elon Musk, and I've met, you know, a lot of billionaires. They're fucking miserable. They're not happy. Yeah. They're frightened. Everybody commodifies them. They feel isolated. They don't trust anybody. Everybody's working for them. It's fucking miserable. Let's actually ease them out of this retarded perspective that actually they've got what they want when they actually know they don't. Every woman they're with is fucking, like, miserable too. Every man, like, they hold such strong social constraints around themselves. Like, that's what pleasure is about. Pleasure is about actually something that's a lot quieter and ruckus. It can be ruckus. It's not that it shouldn't hold its sense of ruckusness, but it doesn't. It has a rhythm. It has that rhythm to it. Like you go underground, you come out, you smell the blossoms. You know, hibernate in winter. It holds its own undulation to it, and it's about understanding how we can mirror nature more and how we are nature in the way that we respond more, and actually needing each other isn't codependent. Needing each other is natural. Being interwoven with each other's lives is natural. I don't have to control you. It's not about like me making you hold the same values to me, like, but we're in commune, we're communing together, we're convening together, I'm going to add to your happiness, right? Just as a friend, we're adding to each other's happiness. Like, just knowing that you're there adds to I feel safer. Like, oh, fucking hell. Like, if I really fucking hit the shit fan, I can phone up Jerry. Jerry, you can phone me up. I can tap in, or I can witness you, or know that you're okay. And once you come out of your COVID, it's like, oh, you've popped out. Great. Brilliant. Love to see, like, it's like you're adding to the curation of my own happiness. And I think that is what COVID has really like provided, is like, where am I going to situate myself in that sense of, people mean a lot to me. I'm not trying to make myself independent anymore. Fuck that. I don't want to be fucking independent. Like, you know what I mean? I don't even want my own success. I want a shared fucking success. Like, do you know what I mean? I don't want accolades or achievement. I want shared achievement. Everything what I do is about sharing that achievement. Do you know what? Or amplifying or assisting somebody else achieving something way better. It's like, then I can duck out. But like, like that amplification. And I think that is, each one of us needs to find our own philosophy and understanding actually what is the ingredients to your happiness. Like what, and it's never going to be in a fucking thing.
When I took a boga, which is a long time ago now, it's coming up for 6 years ago, I really thought it hadn't worked, which was a kind of egotistical, arrogant response, I suppose. So I went all the way to Holland. I'd read a lot about it. I'd heard about it for years. It terrified me. And I went and took it, and I was essentially in a coma for about 30 hours. It was a really fucking boring experience. A coma while still having the faculty to shit and puke a lot.
Oh, gross.
And what happened was...
Is this the froggy thing?
No. Froggy thing's another horrible thing. A boga's from Gabon. It's from the root.
One, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They call it splitting open the head, and it's from the root of a bush. And most people, they use it a lot with heroin addicts. You can take it in, I think, the synthesized form that's called ibogaine. Of course, I didn't do that. I had to do it the traditional way. I didn't have the balls to go to Gabon and do it in a hut somewhere, but I wanted to do the traditional way, which is just vile. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. It was spoonfuls of sawdust that tasted like it had been soaked in ammonia.
Oh, great.
And they put it in your mouth, and it's just the most bitter, acrid. It tastes worse than ayahuasca. And you swallow it, and it takes about an hour to get the taste out, and you're not allowed to drink any water with it. So you just got a mouthful of sawdust, and then they hit you with another one just as you're getting the taste out of your mouth. And after 3 or 4 spoons, I started puking, and everything was just going off. And then I started to trip out, and I heard this voice that very clearly said, "You're here for completely the wrong reasons. You're here so that you can tell people..." I mean, I'd heard that you go on these journeys and you go back in time and you revisit the places in your past where you were wounded that turned you into an addict. And I was expecting I demanded, I'm taking this shit. I want my dream vision trip,
Yeah.
I was like, you're not getting any of that. You're here for the wrong reasons. You're here so that you can just tell people you took a boga. It's an ego trip. And you're here because you're trying to prove yourself to your father still. You have nothing to prove. You're enough as you are. Fuck off. And it said, this is not good. Taking things like a boga and doing it for those reasons is not what makes you a man. a good adult human being. A good adult human being is someone who, exactly what you says, has explored their own code and their own philosophy and lives by it. Doesn't live by someone else's code or philosophy, has done the work, and that's what you need to do. Now fuck off out of here. And then I just puked for another 24 hours.
Oh, shit.
And then I went home and I was like, oh, well, that didn't work. I didn't get the visions and shit. And it took me years to find the humility to go, no, that's the greatest gift I could be given. I didn't need to be operated on by spacemen. I just needed to be sat down and told, stop doing this mad shit. What are you trying to prove? You're enough. And exactly. I still didn't feel it enough to even take that wisdom. It took me another 5 years to process it, and it's why I kind of advocate plant medicine to some people, but with the caveat of don't do it a lot. Do it and then sit with it until you've really digested it. Don't go back the next weekend just because you want to dance to indigenous people's taped music and hug people. Seriously.
I'm with you on that one, to be fair. It's become a weird form of tourism. But also, I think we can consume enlightenment, which is really dodgy.
Well, we're an instant culture, aren't we? You can get a pizza delivered, you can get Amazon will fly shit in with a drone any minute now, and we want instant enlightenment. And it doesn't work like that. Ayahuasca, for me, was 10 years of therapy in one night, but the only reason I was able to process it was because I'd done 20 years of therapy before I did that 10 years of therapy in one night. And if you haven't done the work and you don't know how to process shit, it just short-circuits you.
Yeah, for sure.
And in that sense, it can be dangerous.
Yeah, and somebody's doing psychic surgery on you, so you have to know who the fuck you're doing it, who you're in the room with. Because these are like very expensive toys for the brain. Well, for the psyche, which is not the brain, it's beyond the brain, it's the soul. It's like, it's the essence of who you are. So if you what, I'm really amazed with, people are really cavalier with who the fuck they're doing this shit with. Like, it's like open
we're doing it from a drug culture, and this is the thing I say to people, whether it's on my retreats or when I'm just talking to people about it. Because to be honest, I'm more and more into talking to people about it than dosing people with it, because I think it's escaped from its natural place, which everything does. But there's a danger to that. And one of the things I say to people is, if you have a bad trip and you've grown up in the Amazon, in a village, and you have a difficult time when you take ayahuasca, that's all right. You just wander down the road a bit and you go and talk to your nan about the first time she took ayahuasca, and she'll probably help ground you. You do it here, who are you going to fucking talk to? Because it's not part of our culture, and we've taken something from another culture, and we don't understand this medicine yet. It's going to take a long time before we know how to process this kind of stuff. So that's really the danger. What are you going to do with that download?
Yeah, seriously.
You ain't going to talk to my nan about it.
Yeah, no, seriously. Never know. Never know what Nanny got up to. Yeah.
Maybe talk to your nan about it. She sounds cool. My nan was fucking awesome, but,
Yeah.
She wouldn't have helped me with drugs, that's for sure. That'll do, won't it?
Yeah, brilliant. Awesome.
I think I should cancel any idea of ever talking to anyone else, and we should just do the Friday night with Sam, Sam and Jerry show.
Yeah. Tom and Jerry.
No, I honestly, I could talk to you. That's what I love. We've known each other, 20 years, and sometimes we don't see each other for ages, but there's never an awkward silence.
Never. It's like boom, 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 boom. I know. So cool.
All right. Aww. Thank you, darling.
My pleasure. Total pleasure.
You've been listening to the Jerry Hyde podcast, which on this occasion was recorded in a garden somewhere in North London. Thank you for taking time to listen to it. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, give us a like and follow us, share it with your friends, put the word around a bit, get the ball rolling. It would be wonderful. It's always nice to have more listeners, and we want to provoke some thoughts, and we want to get some discussions going. It's not just about entertainment. This is about getting you thinking about new things. So I hope it's done that.
The title track for this podcast was recorded in the studio with no name in North London. Also, it was produced by my old friend Nick Van Gelder, multi-instrumentalist and incredible talent who played a multitude of instruments on the track. From additional guitars, I played some guitars and he played some guitars. He played the bass because I played it really badly the first time round. He played the drums, he played the Moog synthesizer, and he produced the whole thing. Additional work was done by my friend Kenny Dickinson, who did all the extra keyboards. Incredible musician who's now based in Los Angeles. All the horn arrangements were done by the infamous, mystical trumpet guru that is Noel Langley. And the angelic, otherworldly vocals were performed by the extraordinary Sian O'Gorman. Thanks for listening. See you next time.